MLS is back, and so are we. So excited to have Jessica Sharman joining us. Jess, can you believe, first of all, that we are getting ready for the first match week of the season?
No, I can't. It's such a random feeling, and I'm sure you experience it sometimes in life where it feels like it's been forever since I've done a game, but it also feels like absolutely no time at all. I am super excited. Obviously, it's my first season as a full-time member of the MLS broadcasting side on Apple TV, and I could not believe when I was sent Charlotte FC as my first game. It felt like serendipity, and I am so excited to be back calling a team that I know a little bit about, just a little bit.
Just a little bit of definitely a good friend of the club and someone who has seen the club progress over its short history, going into its fifth season, which is crazy. I know you've seen from up close and a little bit from afar of how they've developed, going from that first season to making it to the playoffs and back-to-back seasons. Of course, there's still that hump to try to advance out of that first round, but what have you noticed just in the progression in their kind of young history so far about where the club is from where things started?
I think the first thing is what has stayed the same, and the thing that stayed the same is the fans, right? I have been blessed to be inside Bank of America Stadium many a time. I've also been fortunate enough to do a couple of Charlotte FC road games, and either way, the fans show out in incredible force, which is the number one thing for the city. In terms of the actual team, I just think that under Dean Smith, they have a true identity. They're starting to find themselves. We've developed a couple of big name stars, which I think is a huge difference as well. The designated players are starting to show up. I can't wait to see Wilfried Zaha back with this team.
Yep.
Pep Biel as a creator, hopefully fully fit. I think that he is the sort of player that can be a true difference maker. I love that you brought up the fact, though, that they need to get out of that playoff slump. Because there's one thing qualifying for playoffs, like you rightly mentioned. It's another thing getting out of that first round. And anyone that followed the club will feel like that New York City round of 3 was a disappointment. And this season is about redemption. They have to get further than that moment, because otherwise you're not growing. You're just staying in a level area.
Yeah, we talked to Westy a couple weeks ago. One of the first things he said to us, because something that they were talking about a lot last season was top four we're pushing to just get that, to make sure we can shore up that home field advantage come playoffs. Now he's saying we're not looking for top 4. We want to win. Like they're really hyper-focused on leveling up each year. How do you kind of see from your perspective this team continuing to be building and progressing as well as they're hoping for a result like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they need to develop the game management side of things. When you look at Charlotte FC's numbers, they conceded far too many goals in the last 15 minutes of matches. They conceded 16, nearly 33% of their goals were conceded 75 minutes and onwards. So I think that's going to be a huge area of growth for this side, which is game management, making sure you're able to see out results, making sure that you don't let up and leave points on the table. In terms of the actual players that have been brought in, I'm excited to see Luca de la Torre. I think that he is a playmaker. He adds more creativity into this side, more connection between the lines. One of the issues I think Charlotte had last season was at times there were big gaps between the lines of field, and maybe the ball wasn't getting out the defensive area through the midfield into the attacking area. Luca de la Torre is known as a connector.
Sure.
He's proven this league with San Diego, so that's going to be a huge signing. The part that I'm a little concerned about, if I'm quite honest, is when you look at the players that have gone out of this team. Obviously, Patrick Argyman has done a fantastic job over in Europe. I get to watch him in England, and I'm excited for what he's done and what the club did to develop him. Idan Toklamati is an exciting player that can hopefully fill his boots. But defensively, Adilson Malanda, that's my big circle. If I'm circling an area of this team that I'm a little bit concerned about, it's how do you replace a player like Adilson Malanda, who has just been the most brilliant defender that this side has ever had.
Yeah, there's a couple points you just made with some names that I definitely want to hit on all of them. I want to start first with Idan Toklamati. Just this week, it was just announced that he is officially here to stay in Charlotte. They're signing him to a multi-year contract extension. This, of course, is coming off of the heels, like you mentioned, of moving Patrick Argyman over to Derby County, where he's been torching over there too, but it was a big shoe to fill, and it seemed like pretty much right off the bat, Toklamati was up for the bill, if you will. And now it seems like this club is ready to invest in him. He's still a young player. He's an under 22. And it feels like they are counting on him to be that 9 for the future. How do you kind of perceive that in terms of, is Idan their guy?
I think he has to be that guy. When you're signing him into a multi-year deal, it instills that confidence and is a very vocal, obvious sign of this is our guy. We believe in him. We want to lock him down and under, and a talent that we want to develop. I just finished watching a video that the club posted, and he talks about how Dean Smith maybe hasn't told him, quote unquote, you're my starting number 9, but the way that he has played, the way that the coach has trusted him, has allowed him to feel that confidence. And as we know, with any position in soccer, when you're believed in by your coach, when you're feeling confident, you're playing better. Idan Toklamati scores a lot of different goals. If you've had an opportunity to watch him in pre-season, you've seen the bicycle kick. If you haven't had an opportunity, you need to make sure you look at that goal, because it's acrobatic, it's fantastic, and it just shows he's a player that's full of confidence. What's going to be even better though this season is when you think about how well he did last season with not limited minutes but less minutes at the start of the season, because obviously Patrick Argerman was the majority starting forward before his departure. Now he's going to be getting more minutes, and he's going to have better service when you consider a player like Pep Biel was out for a large part at the end of the season. He could be ruthless. The second part of that, though, is he has to figure out a way to be unpredictable and continue to be unpredictable, because he's not going to slide under the radar anymore. He's not going to be a player that is unheard of anymore. He's going to be a player that teams that are facing Charlotte FC will have circled in their locker room of, we can't allow him space in and around the 18-yard box or he will punish.
One of my favorite moments from last season was that match against Inter Miami, and he had the hat trick, and it really came because Wilfried Zaha was unselfish and let him take that penalty kick to get that third goal. I think that was one of the coolest moments, and I want to kind of circle back onto Wilf too. There's a lot of questions about where he will be come June, and where, if he will still be continuing with Charlotte or beyond. That's still up in the air. We heard from Zoran earlier, and he said nothing yet, nothing has been decided. But we do know that Zaha is back to at least be here for the first half of the season. Zaha makes an impact in a number of different ways on the team's attitude, on their discipline, and of course just the opportunities he's able to create on the field. What do you think the team can use from him now that he's going into his second season in MLS?
I would say Wilfried Zaha is the player you want on your team, you love as your teammate, but you hate playing against. And that is the biggest respect that any player can have. He would love to hear a statement like that. He draws more fouls than any other player in Major League Soccer, which allows this club an opportunity from set pieces, which I think is fantastic. He creates space for other players because he occupies defenders' attention. And I think that the big thing about Wilfried Zaha is, yes, he can rub people the wrong way with the way that he presents himself, but that's why he's such a special player, because he believes in himself more than anybody else. He will always bet on himself, and he has outstanding footwork. I managed to commentate one of the goals he scored, I think it was against Montreal, where he just dribbled through the entire team and just left defenders in his wake. He has that incredible ability to put the team on his back and do something individually brilliant. But as you so rightly mentioned as well, he also is a good teammate. And Idan Toklamati has been very vocal about the fact he's learning so much under Wilfried Zaha. I think that example of giving up the penalty kick, which Zaha would have wanted, because everyone wants to score, everyone wants that opportunity, but he knew it was the right thing to do for that player, shows an element of growth. And I'm excited to see Wilfried Zaha in a second season where he's adjusted to the league, because it is a unique league. As someone that's come from overseas, the travel is different, the demands are different, the physicality is different. There are so many differences with Major League Soccer that a lot of players take longer to adjust to the league. And I'm excited to see what an adjusted Wilfried Zaha can do. And the other part is, if you look towards the summer, even if he wants out, even if that was on the table, he's going to be wanting to play his best soccer possible to make himself desirable. So in a lot of ways, it's a win-win situation if he's motivated in different reasons to play the best soccer he can for this club.
No, it definitely seems like he elevates the locker room in terms of just the attitude and energy, and even a little bit of professionalism. But he has also been pretty vocal in saying he likes Charlotte. His kids like it. They like the schools. And I think people will be on their edge of their seats to see whether or not he will be here to stay past the summer. But like you said, it still is in his own favor, too, to obviously do well in this first half of the season, because if he were to be looking to move on from here, then he wants to obviously position himself better. Speaking of some others, we talked a little bit about with Dean Smith earlier this week about some of the position battles on this team, and the midfield is a little bit more crowded with some talent, which of course is a good problem to have. There's a lot more depth this season. Like you mentioned, Luca De La Torre being back, Pep Biel coming back from injury as well, and then you have guys like Brandt Bronico waiting in the wings, Jibril Gianni, and of course the captain in Ashley Westwood. Dean was pretty quick to say no one's position right now is a lock. Said it's going to be a competition. We want pretty much everyone to be fighting for all of those spots. What do you see from that kind of group in terms of how it might shake out come the start of the season?
Yeah, competition breeds success. And one of the things I think is so vital for this team is that they are building depth across the pitch. We're focusing on the midfield, but in all areas of the field now there is more competition. Even if you look at Christian Kalina and what happened last season, I think it's a fantastic example. He gets dropped out, he doesn't play, and then comes back in better form. Sometimes keeping yourselves on the toes as a professional just helps you to continue to play your elite level soccer. So I'm excited for this midfield. Brandt Bronico is the hardest working player in MLS. I will say that right away. I mean, his mileage is incredible. He's an athlete, but he does have limitations, which every player has limitations. Perhaps he's not the best progressor up the pitch or connector. So now you're going to have different levels of player with different skill sets, which allows you to perhaps adjust your lineup based on what you're needed in a game. I know Dean Smith likes to always talk about focusing on themselves and not the opponent, but at the end of the day, different teams require fine-tuning, different tweaks on what you need more in that midfield. And now there's that depth that allows him to do so. I think it's funny that you bring up Jibril Gianni, because I think he's fantastic. Yes, he has been known to have an error or two, maybe a little bit complacent on the ball at times, but has fantastic footwork, gets into good areas, and is very agile for a guy of his stature. He doesn't get enough mentions with being as part of this midfield battle. The biggest conversation that I've heard while listening to a lot of Charlotte FC media this week is the conversation about Luca De La Torre and Brandt Bronico in a battle. Well, I think you add Jibril Gianni into this. You've got Ashley Westwood, you've got Pep Biel obviously playing in a more attacking position, and now no one's spot is guaranteed. No one is guaranteed a spot. And the best part about this is there were some games last season for Charlotte FC where Ashley Westwood was suspended with yellow card accumulation, Brandt Bronico suspended with yellow card accumulation. And when that happened, the level of the team dropped because there wasn't someone in the wings ready to step in. When you have competition, it allows you to suffer a few injuries. There's going to be a heavy workload with this being a World Cup that they're going to have to adjust to effectively.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick pause, and we will be right back to continue this fantastic conversation. All right, we are getting ready to go for the start of the MLS season. And of course, Charlotte FC is back starting Saturday. They have a 2:30 kick in St. Louis this weekend. Jessica, one of the other position battles that I want to focus on too, it's one that existed last season as well. And that's that right wing between Liel Abada and Kerwin Vargas. Vargas seemed to win that job last year, but again, they're paying a lot of money still for Liel, and there were some questions, I guess, coming into the season about where his status was going to be on this team moving forward. Come this preseason, it looks like he's been doing his job pretty well. We just saw their last preseason game. He assisted both of Toklamati's goals in their final exhibition that they had out in Coachella. Seems like that could be another position battle. What do you see from that position right now in terms of where it could be trending?
I think Kerwin absolutely won it last season because he was more consistent. And also in Dean Smith's style of play, he likes somebody that's going to get stuck in. He likes somebody that's not afraid to put in a tackle. And Kerwin Vargas, in my 3 years, the first 3 years of calling Charlotte, that was an area that he really worked on, really developed, getting stuck in, being involved on the defensive side of the ball. We hadn't seen as much of that from Liel Abada, but I think the biggest thing is that now Liel Abada is here. There wasn't an opportunity. There was some links, some rumors, some things in the mill that maybe he was going to exit Charlotte FC. That's not the case. He's on the Charlotte FC payroll. He is a Charlotte FC player that he needs to grow. He's still a young player. I think at times with Liel Abada, when you have players that are thrust into the limelight so early, Liel Abada, of course, playing in Celtic at a big club in Europe, you forget that they're still young, that they're still growing, that they're still, as we mentioned earlier on, adjusting to the league. And MLS is a completely different animal in what it demands of players. He has clearly locked in. Preseason looked good for Leo Labada. He's growing in, I would say, connections with players on the pitch. You mentioned the fact that he had those 2 assists to Toklamati. If they're able to grow chemistry, then that becomes a favorable matchup for them. But the thing I need to see more from Leo Labada to be consistently in this side is that defensive work rate, is getting back on the defensive side of the ball, is supporting the fullbacks. Because a lot of time when we think winger, when we think attacking, forward-minded, wide player, you're not necessarily emphasizing the defensive efforts. But if you're going to start Dean Smith's system, you better have that in the back of your mind that you're going to be tracking back, working back. And I think that's where Cohen Vargas has the advantage. But all it takes is an injury. As we mentioned, Cohen Vargas coming out of concussion protocol right now. I'm not sure how fit he's going to be. Hasn't been able to play consistent minutes lately because of that protocol. With that comes an opportunity for Leo Labada to prove himself to Dean Smith. And I think Dean Smith has shown in the past, if you earn a spot, it's yours to lose. And Leo Labada is in a position to find that advantageous position.
And we know that Liel has the speed to do that too. We know he is pretty fast. So this coming weekend, Charlotte FC is on the road to get their season going. St. Louis, who ironically lost one of their players, their center back, and Henry Kessler, who is now a new member of Charlotte FC. We know that he's still dealing with a hamstring, that he got a little injured during this preseason, but he is their quote-unquote replacement for Adilson Malanda, which we've talked about, and Dean himself has talked about. That's not an easy player to just fill those shoes. Malanda did so much for this team for the years. We heard from him emotionally after his last game and what, the city has meant to him, the club has meant to him. So there's definitely a void on that back line. Where do you see some of the holes, and maybe what can someone like a Henry Kessler do, or maybe an Andrew Privet, who also is going to be ready, I believe, for this match 1 to kind of step up in the absence of Malanda?
I feel bad for Andrew Privet, and Dean Smith has been very vocal about the fact that Andrew Privet was one of his best players in the 2024 season, but obviously with signing players, Tim Ream coming in, he saw his opportunity drop. I think Andrew Privet has proven himself at this level. He's still a young player. It's astonishing to believe that he was converted into a centre-back, that he had more experience in the collegiate level playing as a midfielder. I'm excited to see Andrew Privet get that opportunity. Henry Kessler is a funny one because every St. Louis media member that I've spoken to rates him so highly, and I think they're a little relieved, to be honest, that he's not going to have an opportunity to come back and play against his former side. Henry Kessler just couldn't keep fit. That was his biggest issue. When you look at his minutes throughout his career, he has struggled to stay consistently fit, and that's something with Adilson Malanda. It felt like he was ever present. When we look at a squad during Adilson Malanda's time at this club, he barely missed a game other than for suspension. He would get smacked, he would get injured, and he would carry on playing. He was that kind of guy. But I think Henry Kessler, the one concern around him is, can he stay fit? Can he continue to grow in chemistry? Because Adilson Malanda grew fantastic chemistry with Tim Ream. They could read each other like books. Andrew Privet also spent a lot of time alongside Adilson Malanda. It has to be a very intimate relationship between two centre-backs and the goalkeeper as well to show consistency. And that would be my one fear, is how do you replace what a consistent back line that this Charlotte FC team had? And it's going to take time. And there isn't time, because with the World Cup break, we got 14, 15 games between the World Cup window. You can't afford to only be ready by that World Cup break. You have to find a way of growing with chemistry rapidly to make sure you're not dropping down the table or leaving points out to get them.
Just a couple more questions for you. And you just brought it up too. The season's schedule is going to be a little bit different, but it's going to be a heck of a lot more different next season when they switch to the new European schedule, if you will. Having this World Cup break, though, does change things a little bit and kind of does get them maybe in a rhythm of changing up their schedule. But what do you kind of imagine for like the rate and the rhythm that a team can get into this season when they're going to be having such a long break? And maybe this is kind of good preparation for the changes to come.
It's going to be tough. Obviously, the World Cup being here is a big deal, and that's okay. And we're going to have some sacrifices with having a World Cup in the United States. The tough part is, even when there was the Leagues Cup break a couple of years ago, you saw teams struggle. You saw teams that had momentum before the Leagues Cup break then struggle after the Leagues Cup break because they lost all that momentum. But in the same vein, and Charlotte FC was one of the clubs that benefited from it. I think it was the 2024 season, my last season with the club as the radio analyst, where they went into Leagues Cup with zero momentum. They came out of it absolutely all guns blazing. So it really depends on what the team utilizes it as. The other part that's going to be difficult is it depends on how many players teams are missing for the World Cup. If you're missing a player like Tim Ream, if you're missing a player that's very important in your squad, it can be harder to practice. They're obviously going to have breaks. They're going to be traveling. So it is going to be difficult. But that's where the coaching comes in, and that's where the professionalism of the players comes in. You've got to stay fit. You've got to be running on your own. You've got to be getting touches on your own to make sure that your level's not dropping. Sure. And in terms of the change of the schedule up in 2027, well, that's going to be an interesting year because there's going to be the mini schedule. So, I mean, there's going to be soccer all year round for one whole season as they adjust to that new calendar. As someone that grew up with the European calendar, I like it. There's not going to be as much competition with other sports come playoff time. So there's that element. The weather is a little bit difficult to understand because, as we know, with a country like the United States, there's so much variance across the board with weather. I would take playing in the cold over the hot personally. And as we saw with the Club World Cup last season and the weather delays with the lightning, you can't win in a country like America where there is so much wild weather. But from a transfer standpoint, syncing up with the rest of the world can only be a positive thing because now when players come, they're not going to have played an entire season before they arrive and then have to play your season. It just makes those transfers a lot easier and the adjustments between players that maybe are coming from overseas or vice versa more consistent.
Tim Ream said the same thing to me before. He would prefer any day playing in the cold over the hot. Jessica, thank you so much. Charlotte FC getting their season going. First match of their season this Saturday in St. Louis. I really appreciate you.
Oh, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a
That was
pleasure.
awesome. Hopefully we'll do this